much, Ivan. Thanks, Andrew. And let's go to my good friend, Professor Geoffrey Lipman in Brussels. And of course, those in the industry know Geoffrey. I don't have to introduce him. Those that are maybe watching us from outside, Geoffrey has been actually the first CEO and founder, or kind of the brainchild behind the World Travel and Tourism Council. He has been the Assistant Secretary General for the UNWTO, so that means he worked on both sides of the spectrum, and he's now very much involved in the green and climate-friendly issue. Actually, Geoffrey and I were involved in Geoffrey and I were involved in the International Coalition of Tourism Partners, ICTP, and what is an organization that deals with green growth and quality equals business. And Geoffrey now is involved in SunX, and he will probably tell you a lot more. Geoffrey, you also raised your hand, but I thought I'd just wait and give you the floor exclusively now.
Thank you, Thomas, and or Jürgen, as you are known to so many. And as always, hi to my friend Taleb, with whom I worked closely for many years, and I share Ivan's view on Taleb's role as the Secretary General of UNWTO, which was outstanding. But first, I want to take the opportunity, I think on behalf of everyone, to congratulate you, Thomas, on being the most consistent and persistent network creator in our sector. I've watched you build ETN. I've heard all the good and the bad criticisms. You weather them all. You're fearless. You say exactly what you think. And the very fact that you've got, you know, this time of night where I am on a Friday evening, and much later if you're going into Asia, so many people sticking with this event is just a tribute to your vision and your capability as a communicator. So I think on behalf of all of us, it's a 12-month anniversary. I want to make that point. And I did raise my hand. This is a second point, and I say this as an analyst. I agree with pretty much everything in Andrew's excellent presentation. It's a huge pleasure for me to see how effective WTTC is after very, very small beginnings. And it's a great tribute to Gloria and her team. And as Andrew said, we are very pleased and proud to be working with them on what I think is the biggest issue, which I want to talk about briefly. And it's bigger than COVID, it's the climate crisis. But I want to, before I make a few comments on that, I just want to say where I disagree with Andrew, and it's as an analyst. The COVID virus, we can respond to it as a sector and the different components of travel and tourism. But at the end of the day, it is a public health issue. And the opening of travel markets will, all the lobbying in the world will not change the grim reality that this virus kills people, and it kills lots of people. 500,000 people because Donald Trump treated it so casually in the United States. And our challenge as a sector, and we don't like to say this, but I'm old enough to say it, is we are always a risk element because we move people around. Millions of people, billions of people we move around. And it's for that reason, on the one point, I think the government public health authorities have decided we have to have a vaccination regime around the world to give a global protection against this enemy. It's a war that we're in. And 1 year on, all I can see is that there's little improvement in the situation and little indication about when we will return to any sort of normalcy. And I think it was Ivan mentioned 22. I've heard aviation people talking about 24. I think we have to hunker down and do exactly the kind of thing that Ivan has just described, which is to preserve what we can and prepare for a re-emergence at some uncertain time in the future. And I truly believe that vaccination will become a bigger issue than, I think, Andrew, that was when I raised my hand. I think it will become a bigger issue because governments have to satisfy their electors that they're doing everything to protect their people. And it's bigger than we are, I'm afraid to say. So I don't want to take up too much time. Many of you have heard me on WTN before, and I find myself a little bit like that Roman senator who stood up every time, and he started every speech by saying, Carthage must be destroyed. And I'm saying every time, COVID is terrible, but climate will be COVID on steroids. Every government in the world has committed to the reality that if we don't fix this at a global level by 2050, and it means getting on track by 2030 with our carbon reduction, if we don't fix this, I've said this often, I repeat it, your grandkids, my grandkids are going to either freeze or they're going to fry. And if you want to see a better example, you can't find one than Texas in the United States for the last 2 or 3 weeks, which has had totally abnormal weather patterns. And its tourism has been dependent for a century on consistent weather patterns. All of our seasons, most of our products, many of our trade routes are there because of flows which follow weather. And climate destroys the weather that we have known it. So what we're doing at SunX Malta, Sun is a legacy for my friend and mentor, Maurice Strong, who built the UN response system, the Rio Earth Summit, the Stockholm Earth Summit, the United Nations Environment Programme, UNFCCC. Maurice was warning about the climate crisis 50 years ago. And what we are doing is we're trying to help the travel and tourism sector, companies and communities and destination marketing organizations adapt their planning to take account of the climate crisis. We've created a concept called climate-friendly travel, and that is low carbon. It's linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, which are much more complex than anyone in the industry is talking about and require considerable effort to be aligned with. And on the other hand, the Paris 1.5 scenario for climate reduction. And we're working very closely with WTTC. Gloria is taking a lead on this issue. And we do research together. We produce an annual report together. We've worked together to build a registry of climate ambitions where any company and any community at no cost can develop a plan and register it so that we will be aligned with the rest of humanity in following the changing norms that the UNFCCC, the climate agency, and the heads of government are aligning themselves to. We will not be able to create our own reality. We will either have to fit into the global reality, or we will simply be consumed by the crisis. And that's one dimension of our work, is research and a registry of ambitions. And the second dimension is education. It will not be us that are hit by the climate crisis. I will be dead. And most people on this call will be dead when it hits the worst. But our kids and our grandkids, they will be in the middle of it if we don't act. So we've developed an education system. We're looking at schools. We're looking at we have a diploma. We have 45 students from 30 countries around the world in the middle of this. It's the first diploma on climate resilience. And next month, 2 months' time, on the 29th and the 30th of August, we'll host the first of an annual global event called SAYS. It's the Strong Earth Youth Summit. And it will run for 2 days, and it will be a virtual event in 3 regions. It'll be in Canada for the Americas, it'll be in Bangkok for Asia Pacific, and it will be in Malta for Europe, Middle East, Africa. And we'll have a full program with some of the best thought leaders and industry decision makers and academics who are trying to see how we can adapt ourselves as a sector to fit in with where the rest of society is going. The reality is we are behind the curve. We talk a good game, but we do not do much to act. And we have 10 years to get it right. I see this as my last great crusade, and I'm happy to be working with Malta. It's a small island state which first put climate onto the UN General Assembly agenda. And they are supporting the work we are doing. And we would love to hear from people. We would love to engage. We have an open collaboration philosophy. This is a huge problem, and we can't deal with it in small sectoral or small specialized organizations. We have to get behind the leading initiative of the WTTC with the UNFCCC, and we have to follow science, and we have to make changes. The changes will be significant. They will be from the grassroots to the very top of the sector, and we have to start making them now. So, having produced an atmosphere of doom and gloom, let me finish again by thanking you, Thomas, for the opportunity to make this intervention and to say that we are open to SDG 17 collaborations with companies, with communities, with countries, with organizations. We have to move together on this issue.
No, thank you very much, Geoffrey. And I wanted to remind Green and Clean Voice. This is our interest group we started under Geoffrey's leadership, and hopefully you will see more when you go to interest groups and click on Green and Clean Voice. Taleb, though, I had a question before we move on.
I just want to congratulate Geoffrey. Geoffrey, always when he speaks, I feel jealous about it. Geoffrey is full of passion, and this passion is translating into action, really, Geoffrey. I really envy you. You're a wonderful person. What you said makes a lot of sense. But I would just want to make one single comment on the issue of COVID and its relationship with the climate. I think they are two different issues. Climate is something that started before COVID and will continue after COVID, for sure. Now, regarding COVID, although I agree with you on the issue of the vaccine, many countries are going to play the vaccine card, but the vaccine is a card game that's played by the strong countries only, and it does not have equity. You can't impose vaccine just for travel. This vaccine passport, for example, is going to be a disaster, just like the quarantine is a disaster. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm against you in this at all. Just want you to think about it a little bit more. I think vaccine is being used politically now, more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taleb. And if there are more questions, anything, unfortunately, we're running a little bit out of time. So let's move on, because we have 3 more short feedback here.